month is February. February is Reggae Month. Come catch the rhythm virtually. We gone online totally on Reggae Month TV. Mega reggae concerts, interesting reggae documentaries, informative reggae symposia, and lots more. Online daily from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. on PBCJ, Jam Vision, JCDC Facebook page, and several other cable and social media platforms. Details available on the Reggae Jamaica mobile app, Reggae Month TV. Tune in daily and be entertained and informed.
It is February 11th. It's Thursday, February 11th, which means that we are 11 days in celebrating Reggae Month 2021. If you are not tuning in since the 1st of February, then we invite you to catch the rhythm with us virtually. I'm very pleased to present this evening's Reggae Open University, our second one in our year staging. I'm Colleen Douglas. I am the board chair of I'm the Director of Marketing for the Jamaica Reggae Industry Association. And I want to just use this opportunity to say thank you to the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, the Ministry of Tourism, JTB, TEF, CPTC, Java, JCDC. I know I'm leaving out countless sponsors. We also want to say thank you to some of JaRIA's media partners, Reggaeville, Rhythm Agency, Rhythm Magazine, Surfer Reggae, and Reggae Festival Guide for streaming our Reggae Month activities this year for us, so across the world people are able to tune in. So you should be tuning into a number of our platforms. It could be PBCJ and it could be JCDC. Both are also on Facebook. You could also be tuning to our minister's own Facebook page, so that's Olivia Grange Facebook page. And for JaRIA, we're JaRIA Entertainment on Facebook as well. This evening, we are having a special version of Reggae Open University as we partner with the city of Miramar. The people who live very close to us, we call them what? It's Kingston something. They're very close to us in Jamaica, our friends from Florida. And we're looking at Reggae and Resistance, a look at the contribution of reggae in the struggle for freedom and justice, with a special look at the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm not hosting. I'm here to introduce to you our moderator for the first segment of the program, Professor Emerita Carolyn Copper, who initiated the establishment of the Reggae Studies Unit at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Jamaica. She's the editor of the award-winning collection of 2 essays, Global Reggae, and author of 2 influential books, Sound Clash, Jamaican Dancehall Culture at Large, and Noises in the Blood, Orality, Gender, and the Vulgar Body of Jamaica, Popular Culture. Professor Cooper is a well-respected analyst of current affairs, and she writes a weekly article in the Jamaica Gleaner. Ladies and gentlemen, your moderator for the evening, Professor Carolyn Copper.
Thank you very much, Colleen, for that warm introduction. I must just make one little correction that the Global Reggae collection is more than 2 essays. It's a whole set of essays.
You have 2 in there?
On the global impact of reggae. So it's my pleasure to have been asked to chair this evening's forum. It's a very important one, the topic Reggae and Resistance. And I want to start by using a quote from Bob Marley. I know Bob Marley isn't the end all and the be all of reggae, but he really has a powerful line in one drop. So feel this drum beat as it beats within. It's beating a rhythm of resistance against the system. So let me give you the exact words. So feel this drum beat as it beats within. And he says it's, I think it's beating a rhythm of resistance. But the notion of reggae as rhythms of resistance is what we're focusing on this evening, because it's a resistance against systems of oppression that have been globally acknowledged. And reggae has been one of the forces of liberation groups all over the world. So we really celebrate that force of reggae as a call to action against systems of oppression. We have 3 very important panelists today who will be able to carry us through our conversation. If I had on my glasses, I would have read that thing properly, but I'm styling without glasses. So I'm not find the glasses quick, so I'm going to chat no more foolishness. I want to introduce, first of all, Brian Meeks, and I'm going to introduce each panelist as they speak so that we don't forget who they are. So Brian Meeks is a professor at Brown University. He used to be a professor at the University of the West Indies. I will not say that he flew away to greener pastures, maybe colder climes, but he's somebody who has done a lot of work on resistance. He has written about political struggles in Grenada, in Jamaica, and he's well positioned to speak to the issue of reggae as resistance. So welcome, Brian. You need to put on your mic. Need to unmute.
At least
yes,
one person must forget to unmute. Thank you so much for that introduction. And do I speak now or do I wait for further introductions?
No, man, speak now. You have been introduced.
Yeah, okay. So thanks so much for having me on this program, Colleen and Ibo Cooper, who my old school friend who had spoken to him earlier on as well. And welcome to all the other guests. I'm really happy to be here, at least home in spirit, if not in the flesh. I wanted to start with a visit which myself and my good friend, Carolyn's good friend to Rupert Lewis, had to South Africa in the mid-2000s. Many of us will have experienced this kind of visit. And I thought, we could reflect on it. We were in Cape Town, and of course we did the pilgrimage to Robben's Island to see where Nelson Mandela had been detained. Of course, Nelson Mandela, 6 foot in a cell in which he could not stretch his body to full length for many, many years. And this is not so much about Mandela, but after finishing the visit, we were speaking with a number of the guides, and we discovered the guides were former prisoners in Robben's Island, prisoners of the apartheid regime, and they heard our accent and said, "Where are you from?" And so we said, "Jamaica." And it was as though we were all of a sudden heroes. We were, they pulled us aside and, as we would say, horse dead and cow fat. But in the end, what they told us was, they thanked us for being Jamaican and for Jamaican music having saved their souls while they themselves were prisoners under the apartheid regime in that very Robben Island prison. And of course, people, perhaps everybody in this room has heard this story in different ways if you travel beyond Jamaica. As a Jamaican, you are a representative of a tradition which you're not even aware of its effect in distant lands, but it has a profound effect. And basically they said that Peter Tosh and Bob Marley, the Wailers, Eric Donaldson was mentioned, interestingly, in that pantheon, carried them through years of imprisonment as symbols of resistance, as symbols of a way to fight. And so this led me to think about the importance of reggae music. And I've been musing on this for a long time. What is it about reggae music? And I wanted to start by talking about, first of all, the time when reggae music came into its own and the significance of that, what I call the conjuncture of the mid to late 60s and what that meant in a number of different respects. Globally, that reggae music came into a world which was in revolt. It was a world of the civil rights movement in the United States, which developed into the Black Power movement. The world of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and the Black Panthers. The Vietnam War was raging, and this represented a different way to look at anti-colonial resistance. And of course, the Cuban Revolution had taken place in 1959, next door to us here in Jamaica. More specifically in Jamaica, by the mid to late 60s, the shine had gone off the ball of independence. And the sort of expectations that independence would bring better was wearing thin. The avenue to migration to Britain had closed. There were faded expectations. Urban poverty had increased significantly. And of course, the old habits of colonialism hadn't changed. The color hierarchies, the racial hierarchies, that the oppressive color and racial hierarchies had not changed. Independence had not brought better economically. It had not brought better socially. So it was in this context too, I think, that we need to look at another aspect of the conjuncture as to what was happening in Jamaica musically. Because Jamaica was a peculiar locus, if you will, of music. From the late 40s, but certainly by the late 50s, early 60s, that began to consolidate. The influences were numerous. This Carolyn knows this better than anybody else. The influences from New Orleans, the influences from Cuba, via East Kingston and via a direct radio station as well, as was the case with New Orleans. And surprisingly, a small but important influence from the Eastern Caribbean, in which Calypso had developed as a critical art form years ahead of reggae. And some of these Calypsonians had filtered into Jamaica, most notably one of the most outstanding Calypsonians, Lord Kitchener, but many others as well. So there was a sort of melting pot of music, of course, underwritten by Jamaica's own musical forms, Mento, Boro, Kumina. It was just, East Kingston in particular was a rich melting pot of nightclubs generating new sounds. The third dimension I want to think about when we think of the conjuncture is the growth of Black nationalism, and particularly its religious form in Rastafari. And it's impossible to disentangle Rastafari from reggae music. It's almost impossible to do that. And the way I look at it is after the Ronald Henry-led rebellion of 1960-61 was defeated, and after Carl Gardens, Rastafari, whether consciously or retrospectively, engaged in a flanking movement in which it was determined to put its stamp on Jamaica via popular culture. And between the early 60s and the late 60s, a remarkable transformation took place in which the vehicle for Black consciousness, a flag previously carried by the Garveyites, for instance, took the form of Rastafari, and particularly after 1966, when Emperor Selassie visited Jamaica and had a profound impact on the growth of Rastafari, particularly among the youth. And I think of myself as a good example of a middle class, nice brown skinned youth going to Jamaica College to quote unquote, like my friend Kingsley Cooper, but being profoundly influenced by Selassie's visit, by the currents that were alive in Jamaican society at the time. And this affected the entire body of young people across Jamaica in high schools, those who were not in high schools. And I think by 1966, if you follow, a set of songs, you could choose different ones, of course, from Drummond's Addis Ababa in the early period to Andy's I've Got to Go Back Home, Bob Andy's I've Got to Go Back Home by the mid 60s, to the Wailers' Babylon Burning by the late 60s, And we could add any number of songs to that stream by the time you get to the latter end of it. Little Roy's Bongo Naya. Of course, in 1968, Rodney's exclusion from the island, being declared persona non grata, and the riot which followed was a catalyst. So by 1969, anti-systemic ideas begin to dominate in Jamaica in response to all of these issues I've previously mentioned at this conjuncture. But they have a Rastafari character to them, and begin to be reflected in popular music in a profound way. So by the time Max Romeo sings Everybody Join Rasta Bandwagon in the early 70s, everybody has in fact joined Rasta Bandwagon among the youth. And there's a tremendous transformation. So the PNP going up for election in 1972 uses Rasta symbols, and then the thing mushrooms into an unbelievable blossoming of music. You call the names. We mentioned the Wailers, the Congos, Wailing Soul, Junior Baez, Judy Mott, Marcia Griffith, Bob Andy, Dennis Brown, Culture, Burning Spear, and we can, just by calling the names, we invoke the wealth of music which emerges as a consolidated movement in this period. Now, that explains in a kind of very brief nutshell what happens, but it doesn't explain what it is about reggae music, which ultimately, by the mid-70s, makes it such a powerful vehicle that speaks far beyond Jamaica to anyone who wants to resist oppression in the world, from New Zealand to Zimbabwe to Russia. I think there are three closely interrelated things that we need to look at, which reggae spoke to, which other forms of popular music didn't speak to in a holistic way, in the way in which reggae did. And I'm suggesting that that reggae, with its Rastafari influences, could only have come from a small peripheral country of Black people that had experienced slavery, colonialism, and neocolonialism. And therefore were responding to these with an anti-racist message, a deep suspicion of capitalism, and an anti-imperialist message. If you think, for example, classically, Bob Marley's Concrete Jungle, where Marley says, no chains around my feet, but I'm not free. Which of course is a classic expression that oppression is not just simply the enchained version, which we know very well, but one in which the chains aren't present, but you're equally a slave to your wages and to the society that you live in. Or Bob Andy's classical, which I mentioned before, I've got to go back home, which as a statement of alienation expresses the notion of alienation in ways which would make Karl Marx gasp in awe, in terms of explaining what it means to live in a place and a world in which has no meaning to you. And therefore I need to get out of this place because I'm totally alienated from this situation. Most Black American music lagged behind this, because as it grew in its anti-racism, it didn't have an anti-imperialist context, because it came from the United States. And some African-American music developed in this direction, but we understood colonialism in a sort of intimate way, which was different. Equally, white American protest music of the mid to late 60s developed important streams of criticism of US policy. If you think about Bob Dylan and Masters of War as a classic example, developed critiques of capitalism. The most classic example is Lennon, Imagine. But were clueless when it came to questions of race, for obvious reasons. That these very insightful white singers who understood a lot about the systems they were engaged with could not understand the racial question. And so what reggae did was weave these three streams together. Anti-racism, a deep resistance to capital, with an anti-colonial stroke, anti-imperial tinge, which is what Rastafari was. And, you know, it's captured actually in the classic example is war. Until the color of a man's skin is no more significant than the color of his eye, everywhere is war. Until there's no longer first class and second class citizen in any nation, everywhere is war. And of course, those are not Marley's lyrics, but Selassie's lyrics as reinterpreted by Marley. So there were weaknesses, I think, in terms of addressing oppression, even in reggae stroke Rastafari. But it more profoundly addressed these questions than any of the other protest musics of its day, and which is why it became global.
Excellent analysis, Brian, but which is what we would expect from a political scientist of your stature. Really, really taking a global view of resistance. Thank you so very much. I'm sure people will have a lot of questions in the Q&A. Next up is Junior Lincoln. Junior, where you there? May I see you?
I won't look as pretty as you, so I have to hide it.
Yes, I see you don't have no light on your face. I don't know why you're going incognito. But anyhow, it is so good to see you, however dimly. And I want to have a lovely conversation with you about your work in the reggae music industry. For those who don't know, Junior Lincoln is a don in the reggae music business.
Oh my God.
In the best sense of that word. And he really is somebody whose whole life has been committed to the development of the industry. He's at present the chairman of the Dennis Brown Trust and a director of the Jamaica Reggae Industry Association. And Junior migrated to the UK, where he became a very important part of that spread of reggae, globalization that Brian talked about. And he was a producer, filmmaker, you know, engaged in so many aspects of the reggae music business. So Junior, I mean, you're really a senior in the business, you know, you have to change your name to Senior Lincoln. You know, the Junior Lincoln don't fit anymore. But I want to ask you, first of all, I know that from quite early, you were into organizing shows before you were even a teenager. Now, so tell us a little bit about your earliest memories of being in the music business.
Oh my God. Good evening to all the panelists, and good evening to your listeners. It goes back when I was about 12 years old.
What?
Yeah.
And you're 70 little bit now, not true?
I mean, I'm not ashamed, it's 79.
Wow, you're looking good for 79, man. So from you were 12, so 12 from 79, if my math's good, is what? 67?
That's correct.
Wow. So tell us how you got as a 12-year-old. What a 12-year-old little boy doing getting mixed up in music business? And what were you doing?
Well, my father, in the 50s and even the 40s,
yes,
was one of the people who used to do dances. Places like Foresters Hall. This was long before there was a record business, some system business for that matter. The entertainment at that time was just like what it was in England. It was the big orchestra. You would go to the Foresters Hall. I mean, people can't associate that with what the Foresters Hall is now, but it was all where you had bands like Wyatt Coburn and Sonny Bradshaw and so forth and so on. And that is where people go for entertainment and dance. It was very similar to the rank organization in England who was operating the same thing.
Yes.
There's no records or that wasn't around at the time. But out of that, as a little boy, you know, and your father is involved in the shows, you would go and you get home early, but you would go very, very early before it's. But not knowing where my life would eventually go, and not knowing, you know, or prepared it, or it was preparing me for, I would call my purpose. I really think so. I got exposed to seeing the bands rehearsing and starting their first set, and then obviously I have to go home. Then it went on to, I remember even when Sonny Bradshaw used to play at the Doncaster every holiday. People of a certain age will tell you that. Every holiday, Sonny Bradshaw would play at the Doncaster. Doncaster was the Scouts headquarters on Winwood Road. So to answer your question, it started there.
Okay. Now, I don't know if this might be easy for you to do. It's a little logistical thing. Do you have a lamp that you could put in front of your face, Junior? You have a overhead light on, but the light needs to be in front of you so that we can see you.
No, I'm actually, unless I change my location, and I don't know.
No, that might be not so.
No, that'd be too much.
Maybe not be so.
Yeah.
Maybe sit back a little bit in the, yes, I don't know, because there's a light.
Hold on 1 minute, let me see if this helps.
Yes, ma'am. We really need to see your face.
Does that help in any way?
Let's see. Yes, it's a little better, but you need, much better. Yes, man. Much better. But you need to back up a little because your face filling up the whole of my screen. Back up a little. Yes. Yeah, that's better, Junior. That's much better. Thank you. So at 12, the image is a little blurred. I'm not sure why that is, but we're seeing your face much better. So at 12, you got into the music business because of your father. Now, you are lucky because there are some parents who don't want their children to get mixed up in music. So you have to big up your father for having the wisdom to allow you to become an apprentice in the business. So how old were you when you went to the UK?
17.
17. So what did you go there to do? What was the plan?
To finish school and then come back to Jamaica in 5 years, like all of us who went away.
And what happened? Did it work according to plan?
No, not at all. I ended up spending about 24 years.
So what was the hold that the UK had over you?
Well, after school, I don't know what got into me, because I all these years that I was in Britain, I really never worked for anybody.
Good. You were an independent man.
Absolutely. Even in my early 20s, I was independent doing things. And that was also preparing me for even what I'm doing today, because outside of music, I do other things. And,
What are some of the other things you do? For those of us who don't, if you don't mind us fasting in your business.
Come on. I'm a developer. I build very large developments around Jamaica. And
you're a big money man.
Carolyn. I'm the chairman and CEO of Kankara Development. We are the largest provider of water and sewage in the Caribbean.
Excellent. You see, if me never fast, people notice that you're a man whose expertise transcends music. But
it was music. It was music who brought me here.
Okay.
You've exposed me now because the corporate world knows me, and the music world knows me, but both of them don't know. But the music has not been a business for a while.
Yes.
It's been a purpose.
Yes.
And what the good Lord has given me is to allow me to continue achieving my purpose, which is to put my time and finances behind development of our music.
Excellent.
Because as Professor Meeks said a while ago, we have no idea what our music has done to the world.
It's true. It's true. We just take it for granted, you know, because we have created, you know, we just take it light, and we don't realize the impact it has had. So we often have to have foreigners tell us about our music when we should be teaching them. Absolutely. So in England, then you got involved in the music business as a producer. Tell us about some of the big tunes that you produced and the impact of your career there.
I knew Studio One Coxsone Dodd was like a big brother even before I left to go to England. And in the 60s, the early 60s, when Jamaica music was really moving abroad.
Yes.
In the inception of the music, what happened is that the idea of Jamaica music, it really wasn't started as a business. It was started by Coxsone Dodd, not enough rhythm and blues was coming out of America at that time, because the crossover was taking place between rhythm and blues and rock and roll. And rock and roll was a bit light for the sound system here. So they had to find another way of making the music the way that our people like it.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the lightness of that rock and roll? Why didn't it appeal to us, you think?
The bass section, for one, was very light.
There was no bass?
No, it was very, it was like a middle-of-the-road thing to be accepted by the wider society and the whiter groups in America, not even so much England at that time, America. Looked at our music, covered quite a lot of them, lighten it up a bit to what we would call crossover to the general public.
But go ahead.
And that was very light for us.
Yes.
So what played another place that I put a lot of time into since I came home from England is, which is over 40 years now, is Trenchtown and Boystown. You know, those it's very dear to my heart because it was out of, and funny enough, a lot of people don't know that the first Marcus Garvey Church was actually in Trenchtown. And out of that, the question you asked, the music started to dwindle down. But there was a theater, and still is a theater called Ambassador Theater.
Yes, I know
in
that.
Trenchtown. That live music started to be played. It's a movie theater, but every Thursday, Ver Johns, and I have to give a lot of credit to that gentleman because he started
Opportunity Hour.
Absolutely. Where the winner, every week the winner would get £2 and the second would get £1. And there would be a grand final every 3 months, and the winner at the grand final would get £10. That's a lot of money at the time. But it encouraged young artists around, and the musicians. The band that used to play is a band which you hardly hear the name of, is Val Bennett. Val Bennett was a character, the way he dressed. You know, suits and all of that when he performed. But he was a backing band for the singers. People come and dance, and funny enough, even Alton Ellis used to dance, but Alton Ellis was not a singer at the time. His sister Hortense was a singer, and Alton was a dancer. So what the sound system operators, namely Coxsone, and Duke Reid would do, because they were the main competitors at the time. They would go to those shows and look at the young artists coming up, people like Owen Gray, who JaRIA is honoring this year, Jiving Juniors, Downbeats, Jimmy Tucker, and so forth and so on. And look at those artists and say, okay, they're going to try a thing by going into Stanley Motor Studio and recording artists like the ones I just called, and then play on their sound system to outdo the other one. Nothing about sales. It didn't start at that way at all. But very little record players around or gramophone around. So the only way for people to hear these songs outside of the dance would be to go into a bar and listen to the jukebox and punch the song. That started to become very popular, and the jukebox operators started to do very well. But people would go to a dance, forget about radio. These music would never play on radio at that time.
We're too damn backward.
So they would go into the bars and clubs and punch the songs on the jukebox. So the jukebox operators started to do extremely well. People would ask them, why don't you put, for instance, just using one song, why don't you, we hear a song called On the Beach by Owen Gray. And he said, I heard it in a dance or something. And I said, no, it's not available. It's just Coxsone playing it, because you can play it and then jive Duke Reid about it. And then Duke will do the same and jive back Coxsone. After a while, after they played those songs for a while, what would happen now is that the jukebox operator would approach him and say, listen, sell me 100 copies of the song, man. I said, 50 copies. No, I have a player. But after about 3 or 4 months playing the record, and the jukebox operator started to offer them good money for it. They said, okay, I'll sell you 50 copies or so.
Excellent.
And then they would put it in the jukebox. And then now, ordinary people started, not ordinary people, but it started to get wider in terms of the listenership for and that's where it really started, and I show you the importance of that. Eventually, Duke Reid or Coxsone daughter would then start to realize then, all right, I want to make some more songs.
Yes.
If I sell this one because I've played it enough, I can earn enough money to start doing 2 or 3 more. And then it started to get to the public where they started to sell it now. The general public could go and buy it because more people started to buy record players. But the ones who went to England, had more access to a little bit gramophone and all that. Even though it wasn't so great at that time. It was just not too long after the war, after the Second World War. So the infrastructure was damaged badly. But at least you had a little more access to a gramophone.
Yes. What
would happen then when you're in England in the 50s and 60s, very lonely place. It's a very strange place because it was all coal that was running everything. So the place was damp, it was smoggy, it gave you everything that you shouldn't be getting in terms of health. But anyway, the only thing that we had in England at that time to hold on to our culture was on a weekend. In London, people started to gather together. 10, 15 people would sit, and became 20, it became 30. We couldn't get any venue, so you sit in a basement.
Yes.
And people would come from Manchester or Birmingham into London. They would come in on a Friday night or a Saturday morning, stay with friends. Everybody pack up in and just stay. But at least on the Saturday,
you'd have a dance.
Well, we don't even reach dance yet. Just
house party.
Playing some music and listening to some music, but listening to rhythm and blues mostly.
Yes.
I remember we didn't have a lot of Jamaica music.
Yes.
The rhythm and blues that we used to, Roscoe Gordon and the Shirley and Lees that we used to hear in Jamaica. And then we would buy lamb and curry it, and then that was our curry goat. Okay, so you had the
your handmade fashion.
Oh, you had to do these things, and then what happened? Tom or Miss Jane would hear about what's happening on a Saturday, and that grew.
Yes.
And it wasn't in a gram anymore. People would make up a 2-liter sound box and do a little thing, and it's more like a sound system now.
Yes.
But small sound system, and it grew from there. Now, the significance of that is that in terms of the development of the music, you know, I keep telling people that England played the greatest part in that, and I'll tell you why. When we found out, not me, because I was integrally already involved with Coxsone and so forth and that, but when they realized that Jamaica music could be found, they would, if you're coming from Jamaica, the first thing you would ask people coming up is to bring me a Jamaica music, Jamaica record. You don't have to tourist record, you know, just a Jamaica record, not many of them being made. And they would bring it up, and people would come to lick up, and that kind of grew. Now,
yes,
what happened hereafter now is people would listen to it, come to the little dance and listen to them, and then go to, forget about the big record shop, the little corner shop that was selling records, and go to them. And one specific lady I can remember is Mrs. King. She was in Stamford Hill, and the other one was, well, it was Shalitz. This was a Jewish gentleman who had a vision for African music, and it was an eccentric, because you see him, you never realize how much money that man had.
Like you in Junior.
I don't know about that. So they would hear the music and go to this record shop and say, "Can you get me this record?" And they would borrow the record from the person who played it and take it into the record shop and say, "This is the producer of the record."
Oh.
Coxsone Dodd from 13 Brentford Road, or Duke Creek from Bond Street. And what these people do, being very, very smart, is to write to Coxsone or to Duke Creek and say, "You have these records, can we buy 50 copies from you?" And they would sell them the 50 copies, and glad to get it because of overseas sales.
Yes.
And out of that 50 copies, it would come, and in no time it would be sold. And they would go back again and say, "Listen, I'd like to get 200 copies. Great, 200 copies. And you send it off. It would reach a stage where they said, "But this don't make sense importing the record. Why don't you do an agreement with us that we can release it for you, and we pay you your royalty?" And that is where it started from, in terms of companies in these small little label, including Shalitz, including, well, Ireland was a little different in the sense of what Ireland, Chris came to England, I think it was 62 or something like that, 61. But the whole process had started, and Chris was a visionary.
He certainly was.
Moved this company to England and started to brought over people like Millie Small, brought over people like Jimmy came after, Jackie Edwards, who was one of the early people at the Opportunity Hour and so forth and so on. And that is where the whole thing started from.
So where were you in that process now?
In that process where after leaving school, where I said I've never worked for anybody, I saw where this thing was going. But it's just a very spiritual thing that I can't explain, because I started to, when I realized people were after the music, I would import them myself, and because I had a knowledge of the thing, I started to sell records very, very early. But it was 1960, and then I started to do shows. I started to do shows and dances because we were starved.
Yes. You were in your 20s at this time?
Yeah, man, I was about 20. About 20 years old. And so that became my business. It wasn't meant to be a business.
Where would you have gotten the seed money from now to put on a dance? How would you get funding to do that?
For those of us who live abroad,
yes,
a lot of us, including myself, and show you how funny life is, you would do a thing called interior decorating, which is to strip people wall and take off the wallpaper and all that kind of decorating. I would end up really doing that, because the first time I did 700 houses or something like that, nobody believed that I could do that, because I've never built 2 houses in my life, but I wanted to build 700 houses. But again, it was the experience of Britain that took me there. But what was now very, very significant after I was doing these shows, the music started to move, really started to move. And Cox and Dot from Studio One came over to England and stayed with me because, my brother himself was extremely close, like brothers.
Yes.
So he stayed with me, and he said, and I used to take him around to do the business. And he said to me, Junior, listen, why you don't enter the music business, the record business? I said, listen, I don't know about that. But he said, listen, by taking him around, I started to learn what he was doing in the recording side and started to contribute to that. And this was the way he got me involved, because after he left, I was responsible for importing what we call the white labels now, the pre-release. And that became a business now, because importing the pre-release, I would set the release dates for the companies that he was dealing with.
Yes.
And so forth. I would make the songs popular inside of the dances and then choose the release dates for them. And I was now involved in the record business now, seriously.
So we're going to wrap up soon, because we have Kabaka Pyramid also to come on in. So what would you say in conclusion was the highlight of your career in the music business? I know that that's a hard question, but looking back over all these years, is there a particular moment where you say, yes, this is the pinnacle of what I have accomplished in the music business?
There's so many things, but one that I think was extremely important in 1972, when the famine was in Ethiopia.
Yes.
For the first time, we were seeing the truth of what was happening in Africa on TV. And I remember at that I was running a big record company, because I was releasing all the Studio One stuff.
Yes.
So I was not quite a big record company. And I remember the night everybody in England saw what was happening in Ethiopia. And it was on the news straight through. And when I went to the office, I said to my staff, did you see that? Of course, everybody was saying, of course we saw it. And I said, we have to do something about this. And but what can we do? And I said, the only thing that we can do, the thing we know anything about the show business. I said, why don't we do a show and ask all the Black artists in the country to give their services to it and see how much money we can raise. But he said, why not? This is what we know. But I remember saying to the staff, I said, all right, if we're going to go for it, we have to do this in about 3 weeks, because this thing is happening in front of us.
It's current. You have to catch that wave.
No, so I said, to do that, we have to close down operation and just concentrate on that. And somebody said, yes, you're ready to go, let's go. But I said, listen, before we go, let me just warn you about something. The first thing you're going to hear is that we're going to thief up the money. So let me just warn you about that, I said, that is the first thing that we're going to hear. But I said, there's a way that we can stop that. We have to try and get a big organization, charity organization, to be the patron. And we don't touch the money. We just put the show on and the big organization. And we approached a few, and Save the Children, when we approached Save the Children, that is headed by Princess Anne, they agreed, and that was exactly what we wanted. And we started to move ahead. Now that was very, very, very important, and I'll tell you why. It was the first time anybody, white or black, would realize that artists can do something to deal with the world situation. We put on that show in 1972. It was the first time that Bob Marley and the Wailers was going to play to a big black audience, because the audience that they were playing is all white audience. But we at that show, we exposed them to a real black audience, and we used all the artists, the black artists, whether from America or England, who was in the country at the time.
Yes.
A very successful event. Obviously, Save the Children, the money went through them and they sent it to Ethiopia. 10 years after, no, sorry, it was 74, not 72,
74.
In 84, it happened again.
Yes.
And again, nobody moved. This time, I was far more experienced in the business and so forth, and the whole black situation was getting a little better in terms of acceptance. And this time, I approached the music industry, the general music industry, and we formed a committee. I was able to convince, and I had a very strong attorney who was attorneys for a lot of big record companies and so forth. And he loved the idea and used his office in the West End of London to be the headquarters, and I was chairperson for that committee. With a lot of I was the only black person on that committee because it was all big record companies.
Yes.
And we decided to do that event at the Royal Albert Hall.
Top.
Yeah, man, straight to it. At the Royal Albert Hall, and because these big record companies executives were a part of it, we were able to get a lot of the big white artists to perform. Again, I produced the show and produced the movie for it. I was only, this was 1974, so I was a young...
84 now.
84, yes. Yeah, so a young boy. And we produced it. And the significance of that now is Bob Geldof, who was with a group called the Boomtown Rats. We asked all of the artists that we could ask, and he came forward to say that he would do something. He could not perform, but he would do something. I said, okay, write a song, because I need a theme song.
Yes.
For the event. And Bob Geldof and Midgeor wrote a song called Do You Know It's Christmas? And that became the biggest pop song, selling pop song in the world until today. I launched that song at the Albert Hall, putting 6,000 lyric sheets on each seat. And if I show you the film of it, you'll understand the history, because at the end of it, we had a grand finale with all the artists coming back on stage and the Royal Albert Hall standing up and singing "Do You Know It's Christmas" in aid of Ethiopia. And a lot of money, because the big record companies were committed to it, and Princess Anne was there, and blah, blah, blah.
Junior, let me tell you, me don't understand the people them who organize up this forum, because with due respect to Professor Meeks and Kabaka Pyramid, you could have did run the whole show. So, I'm really sorry that we can't talk anymore, because I've been so fascinated by your insights that I completely lost track of time. So, we're getting rocks up for my inefficient management of time, but we really couldn't stop you. And I apologize to the session that is coming after that. Boy, it looked like we're going to have to teeth a little piece of your time. But big up Junior Senior Lincoln for that wonderful account of how reggae, Jamaican music, all its forms has had such a powerful impact on the world, as you say, starting with the UK. Now we turn to the final presenter, immaculate Kabaka Pyramid. Boy, Bossy, what a way you're handsome. Look on that, the outfit. Me didn't think me was hot, but you dust me out, man. This is a royal outfit with your gold and your man.
It's when I see yours, Auntie, I had to represent,
says be inspired for a change. All right, we will take the compliment then. Boy, you look sweet, man. You look sweet. But you're not here for your looks.
True.
Although those are quite striking. You are here for your politically committed lyrics. And I tell you, I am one of your biggest fans. I remember when you came to speak at the university, man, you just mashed up the place. I like your blend of hip hop with reggae dancehall. And by the way, we can bust it to the world, There's a group in Cuba that is planning a major festival in November. And you are one of the top artists that they want. I've been working with them. I'm going to talk to you off here because I'll get VP Records committed.
Wow, that sounds good.
Once we get the vaccine, and me don't say it's a Cuban vaccine, me want, because you trust the Cuban biotechnology. But now trying to work on a vaccine them. All me say a Cuban vaccine, me want. So big up Kabaka Pyramid. And I look forward to your insights now on the impact of reggae across the world. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, first of all, as you rightfully said, I could listen to Uncle Junior speak for hours, and even Sir Brian Meeks, very interesting. So I give thanks for being included in this panel. And, as a young artist, although I feel like, I'm getting older in this thing now, but we're still young and we're still giving thanks.
How old you were when you started? How old you were when you started?
Well, all right. So when I started, because what we mean by I started, because from high school, we had a sound system. You know what I mean? Like I went to school, I went to Campion, and me and my brethren them who are still my management team up to this day, and Abishai is and the chair of the Reggae Month committee and all of these things. Like we started out with the sound system thing, and then that's how I kind of got into the music. I was, a person who, loved to, select the music. I used to talk on the microphone. I used to do behind the scenes work. Like this was the era when a lot of remixes were being made. Like we used to take the reggae and dancehall vocals, the acapella, and put it over some hip hop beats and things like the popular rhythms at the time. And, we used to grow up in that era. So I used to be on the computer doing all of them things. So that's kind of how I got familiar with the software to record. This was a computer age, where, Pro Tools and things like that. So around 2002 is when I started, making rhythms and beats and doing writing and recording myself, experimenting with different style. Like my thing is I didn't really have any background in music, like from a youth. So I didn't grow up in the choir or anything. I never know how to sing to save my life. So, I was heavily influenced by Sizzla music. Now, Sizzla is what really brought me on the path of Rastafari. Now, as an early youth, young Rasta youth, just natty up my head and I rap turban and everything like Sizzla, even though I never go Bubba Hill yet. It's just the influence of the music. I wanted to sing and chant and sound like Sizzla, but every time I try and sing, it just sound like rubbish. So... because I was listening whole heap of hip-hop music, from I would say from 96 when cable TV was big in Jamaica. That is when we start watching BET and MTV, and immediately I started gravitating towards the deeper lyricists like the Wu-Tang Clans and the Nas and, Cannabis and Mos Def, Talib Kweli. Some of these guys who, they had more deeper lyrics, more political kind of lyrics, Dead Prez and some of these artists. So I found that expressing myself through hip hop and rapping was easy for me because you don't have to worry about melodies or the key of the rhythm or the pitch. Not for sing at all. So from that time, no, but that's the thing. Like I really cherish reggae music and the impact of it. So I used to just have my own home setup. So I never really have the experience of going to no big studio and having no producer teach me or give me guidance on how to use my vocal instruments. So it was a lot of experimentation at home, and I was always developing the singing voice, but I would be more comfortable to rap for somebody, you know, to the point where it would almost sound like I grew up in New York, because I study in the hip hop so much, even though I never really lived there. We used to travel to Florida every now and then, you know what I mean? Because my father is a businessman, you know, so I used to follow him go Florida and things. But I never really lived in the US to really learn the accent or things like that. So, you know, but it's over the years now, I would have said around 2010, 2011. So this is like 9 years later, you know. This is when I felt comfortable to deliver myself as a reggae artist, like, you know, melody, singing. I still don't consider myself a singer, I'm more a DJ. But even to DJ, you have to have melody.
Trust me, you can't sing.
Yeah. I mean, we try my best, you know, I will give thanks for the blessings that we receive through the music. You know, but my thing was always to influence people in the way that Sizzla influenced me. You know, so when I travel the world now and have the experience of going on tour with my band, you know, I'm a part of that generation that saw it very, you know, relevant and valid to go on the road with your band. So we're talking about Protege and Taurus Riley and Chronix and, you know, a lot of these acts who, you know, young artists who really step out with the band and made the sacrifice to present the music this way. And I still can proudly say that I have the same musicians that I started with when I first, you know, joined my band, you know, and we just grow and develop together, them as musicians, me as songwriters. And, you know, back to the point I was making, like really seeing people and them telling me that, you know, your music changed my life, your music make me stop eating certain things, because, you know, I've been a vegan for 18 years and I sing about these things in my music, you know, Rastafari being the influence, you know, behind that and things. So when people tell me things like that and the music influence them spiritually, you know, just the other day, somebody tell me them, you know, somebody they know named their son Kabaka in a Trinidad. And these are the things that really significant to me and show me that the music is really powerful. You know, and I've always took that approach. Songs like Well Done, Mr. Politician Man, Never Gonna Be a Slave, No Capitalist, Warrior, Liberal Opposer, all of these songs that, you know, really talking about, you know, how we view the system and the oppression that we've been facing as Black people. Even though I am a man who you could say grew up in uptown Jamaica. You know, my father and my mother, you know, they grew up poor in Portland and Trelawney respectively, you know, but they worked their way, you know, so to speak, up in society, you know, very self-sufficiently and things. So they could afford to put their youth into certain schools and things. So, you know, even given that being my upbringing and thing, I still saw it necessary to always represent, you know, the less fortunate through the music, because that's the music that I was influenced by. And I feel like we as artists, especially ones who, you know, have a certain maturity and a certain education and thing, have to use the platform to really benefit everybody else. You know, so that has been always my motivation why you would never hear Kabaka doing certain type of music, you know, because I know the importance of it. I know the weight that the music carries and the influence. You know, we can talk about apartheid, we can talk about Zimbabwe, we can talk about, you know, even myself as a young Rasta youth, you know, who, you know, grew up in the Christian church and never used to question anything before the music. The music is what made me really question things and say, but, you know, why this? You know, that no make no sense. Why we do this and why we do that? You know, it make you question the classist system, the racist system in society that a lot of people are blind to. It make you question why Jamaica still kind of bastardize reggae and Rastafari and even ganja. You know, the three things that we are known for right across the world. You know, so these are the things that, you know, really inspire me to keep up the music and keep the message strong in the music, you know?
Yes, I. Big respect. So I think we can stop the formal discussion here, and we have a couple minutes where we can open it up if there are any questions. Are we really gone too far? It's 6 minutes past 7. We can get a little chance to see if anybody has any questions for our panel. I'm appealing to the people in the next panel.
Prof, we have been getting good comments, but we have not gotten any questions. So I think it's fair to throw to Miramar.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. You know, to our panelists, to Brian, Junior, Lincoln, and to Kabaka Pyramid. We would all agree that we had a fantastic discussion. So we throw it back now to Colleen and the Miramar part of this wonderful program. Big up everybody. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Professor Cooper, for your grace and your wit and your down-to-earthiness that no one does as well as you. Thanks also to our panelists, Junior Lincoln, Kabaka Pyramid, and Professor Brian Meeks for sharing with us. I throw now to a wonderful lady who is a sister who from Florida, from Miramar, Commissioner Alexandra Davis, rather. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to listen to the other panelists and, of course, to see my dorm mama, Carolyn Cooper. She looks just like my age, but, you know, when I was at University of the West Indies, Seco Hall, she was
you did live on that hall.
I really appreciate being on with her. All right, so I'd just like to say good evening, pleasant good evening to everyone. Thank you for listening in. And we have our panelists here, and they're ready and raring to go. I'd like to thank JaRIA, the members, the chairman, Ewan Simpson, the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sport under the direction of Minister Olivia Babsy-Grange. I'd also like to thank our Consul General of Miami, Oliver Mayer, who's always been supportive of our Reggae Month initiatives. And it's indeed a pleasure to partner once again this year. We dub our month Black History Meets Reggae Month. And so without further ado, I'd like to also thank our panelists who are coming forward, but I'd like to introduce our moderator. He is administrative law judge, Norman Hemming, and he is an Honorable Norman O. Hemming III. He has served as administrative law judge who oversees the Social Security Act, and previously Norman served as a special counsel to the United States Attorney with the United States Department of Justice. In this position, he helped to manage a staff of over 230 attorneys and staff, and had offices based in Key West, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm, and Fort Pierce. Norman's put his time pursuing an undergraduate degree in government and political administration at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and Cornell University. He is a Merit Fellow graduate of Harvard Law School, where he served as an associate editor of the Law Journal and president of his Student Bar Association. He has a theology degree from Shiloh Theological Seminary in Stamford, Virginia, and is an ordained minister. Help me welcome Honorable Norman O. Hemming III.
All right, thank you so very much, Commissioner Davis. We're excited here in Miramar to be collaborating with the City of Miramar, with Commissioner, former Deputy Mayor of the City of Miramar, as well as the folks in Jamaica and JaRIA. We love you and we're glad to be here. We're going to get right into what we're doing this evening. We're going to take a little different perspective here across the Caribbean Sea in South Florida. In that we're looking at Reggae and Resistance from the perspective of its impact on the Black Lives Matter movement. But in particular, we want to take a look at what were some of the things that caused the growth of reggae music and its explosion around the world. And so we're looking at a very tiny area. And so we're looking at a confluence of issues, right? How it is that, as Junior Lincoln explained to us, how the big band era declined in Jamaica at a time when ASCAP was rising to prominence in the United States, although it had started back in 1914 in terms of ASCAP and their influence on the musical industry. However, in 1931 to 39, what we saw from ASCAP is that they had dramatic enforcement efforts in music around the world, including on this tiny island of Jamaica that produces so many great and important things. And there was a 400% increase in the amount of royalties that they were charging at that time. At the same time, they began signing a lot of big band entertainers who Jamaican big bands would have been playing for the Jamaican uptown crowd, right? So there was this whole, and at the same time you had the rising up of the Black Power movement, not only on the island of Jamaica, but across the world. So it was these confluence of issues that we think, that we would like to look at in terms of how it impacted the development of reggae music, and then the impact of that reggae music on politics and culture and entertainment. So this time, in terms of how it's also impacted legislation, we're gonna touch right now. We're gonna go a little bit out of order in terms of the people that we have. The first person that you're gonna hear from today, right after you watch a 1.5-minute video, is going to be State Senator Shervin Jones. Now, Senator Jones is actually born in South Florida in the city of Hollywood. He comes from a long line of politicians here in the United States. He is a graduate of Florida A&M University, where he has a degree in biochemistry and molecular biology. So he's one of them smarty pants brainiacs, all right? And he's taught for many years at both the college level and at the secondary high school level. But what's also interesting about State Senator Shervin Jones is that in 2018, he came out openly as a gay person in this, and as a result, became the first openly gay Black person and the first openly LGBT Black person to serve in the Florida state legislature, in a state that overwhelmingly elected, of course, the great Donald Trump. Okay, let's move on from that. But let's first of all listen to the video. That's 1.5 minutes approximately. And then the next voice you're going to hear is that of State Senator Shervin Jones as he gives us his take on reggae and resistance.
The Miramar Cultural Center has partnered with the Box Gallery for In Time of Protest, a public art exhibit recognizing Black history and the Black Lives Matter movement as part of American history. Featured in the Anson Family Art Gallery, this powerful exhibition documents events that united a new generation in peaceful protest on the continual climb towards social justice. Curated by Rolando Chang Barrero, the exhibit features photographs and images by a variety of artists of all backgrounds. These pieces were gathered under one roof to give voice and light to these events so that others could witness history in the making in the summer of 2020.
This particular exhibit really encapsulated all that has taken place over the last year in terms of Black lives and the impact that the Black lives have had on the rest of the world when it comes to police brutality.
I joined in solidarity with a lot of my friends who have been on the front lines of the civil rights movement. My role as curator and as documentarian is just to amplify the voices that are strong enough and need to be heard.
Senator Jones.
Thank you so much, brother. Thank you so much, Brother Hemming. And good evening to all of you. Before I even get started, I have to give honor where honor is due to my good friend, Commissioner Alexandria Davis. You look across in the South Florida area, very few people have done something dealing with Black history. And the fact that that Commissioner Davis, you have convened this together, kudos and hats off to you. I could have sit and listened to Brother Junior Lincoln, Brother KP, Brother Meeks the entire time. I didn't even have to speak because just being able to learn the history of reggae in that context was not only amazing, it was a history lesson for me, period. But I think as we look at reggae and what Mr. Junior spoke about, what KP spoke about, and what Mr. Meeks spoke about, and you look at the Black Lives Matter movement, it ties right into each other. Commissioner Davis and I, we marched together, not once, not twice, but 3 times during the time of the George Floyd protest that was taking place over the summer. The one thing that I've noticed that in the wake of the George Floyd, in the wake of Breonna Taylor, in the wake of Ahmaud Arbery, all of these things happened because of the injustices of police brutality and systemic racism that has been going on in this country, not just in 2019 and 2020. This has been going on for over 400 or 500 years that we've been dealing with the systemic racism within this country. And the chance that we were able to participate in on the banners that were flying, they called for sweeping reforms in policing and for the dismantling of white supremacy. And even as those crowds marched through the streets of New York and Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles and Baltimore and several other cities, the flags, hear this part, the flags of several Caribbean countries could be seen in the midst, in the pulsating rhythms of reggae music, even playing and blasting in the background while we were marching on the streets. Even you're looking at even in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, New York, you hear the reggae music blasting in the background. This was socially conscious reggae, as in the protest groups and songs of people like Bob Marley and the Wailers and Burning Spears, Steel Pulse, Third World, and all these other iconic groups. That was resistance reggae. Even resistance reggae that was playing in the background, such as Get Up, Stand Up for Your Rights. I mean, those were songs that were being played in the background during that time while we were marching. If you look at this time and you look at Black Lives Matter, it is no secret that what Black Lives Matter is. And it's no secret that Black people across the United States, regardless of their cultural identity, have been disproportionately targeted and killed by the hands of police in America. We have seen it again with Breonna, with George Floyd, Tamir Rice, and so many more innocent Black lives who will still be with us today if we actually had an America that gave us justice and not just us who was fighting for it. And that's what we're seeing right now, even within this country, because Black Lives Matter is not only a social movement, it is a call to action. And right now, what we see in the United States is that the Black Lives Matter movement is calling America the carpet for the things in which they have been silent about for so many years. It's not just Black people marching, it's not just whites marching, it's Black, white, gay, Arab, all of us, because everything that you can look at, especially searching back to the time of the Caribbean, like my grandfather who came here from the Bahamas, he came here in search for a better life. I can tell you this one thing, and they came search for the land of opportunity, but what they did not come here expecting. Many of our family, your family members also, they did not come here expecting the underhanded and blatant oppression that we still deal with in this country today. And so when you talk about reggae, when you talk about the time that we're in right now, this fight is not new. It's something that we all have been in together for so long. And so as we continue to have these conversations, and you look at people like Brother Junior, who I still got chills as he spoke about the history of this music, of the fight in which we were talking about. It should give us more and more and more daily dosages of why we as a people cannot allow legislation and all the things that has been happening in this country to slow us down. We have to make sure that we continue to elect people like Alexandria Davis, who are not afraid to challenge the status quo, sitting on daises to let it be known that you cannot continue to build these walls against us when we too are trying to bring in the wealth gap that whites have allowed our communities to ask in for years. That's the type of community that we have to build, putting people in leadership that has to move. You know what? When Mr. Junior was speaking, that's exactly what he was saying in so many words. What they have laid down for us right now, for people like myself to serve in Tallahassee as a state senator, Alexandria Davis to serve as a commissioner in the city of Miramar, those were briefs that were laid for us to get here right now. When we talk about reggae, the Black Lives Matter movement that we're in right now, I admonish people and people who are our allies. If you're going to use the Black Lives Matter movement, show some sign and some action with the Black Lives Matter movement. Don't just hashtag and tweet about it. Make sure your boards look like Black Lives Matter. Make sure your C-suite look like Black Lives Matter. Make sure your daises and your boards look like Black Lives Matter. Because that's what all of this is. Because truth be told, it has always been a unit between Blacks and the Caribbean community. And as long as we continue to stand together, we can't be divided. Not this time, because we're too close. We have to be together and united in this moment in time. I promise you, what we've been fighting for years can come and will come as long as we stand united, even in this time. And not just because it's Black History Month, but because it's the right thing.
State Senator Jones, thank you so very much. I know you have a plane to catch, but perhaps you could give us a little bit of perspective on this. So we had Blackout Tuesday, and part of those marches that you were involved in, integrally involved in with Commissioner Alexandra Davis. But we also had all of these reggae superstars and dancehall notables who were at the forefront of this movement. So you had people like Spice, who was marching in Atlanta. You had Beanie Man, and you had Bounty Killer, right? And you had Sean Paul, all of who were very involved, either online or in person, with what's happening in the Black Lives Matter movement. What is it about what these artists did and this musical genre that prompted you, State Senator Jones, to get involved in seeking to pass legislation like what we saw happen in Georgia in terms of getting people out to vote and making sure that we don't have any type of repressive laws on the books that would keep people away from the polls and keep us away from and keeping us disenfranchised?
Brother Hemming, you know, here's the thing. The thing is, there are some people who get involved in the movement and the fight because they genuinely want to do it. And there are people who get involved in the fight because they're trying to get reelected and sell CDs, right? And so a lot of the people who you saw in the fight, and I'll keep going back to Commissioner Davis. Oh, and Commissioner Yvette Colburn was out there with us also. The reason I call us the sisters in the fight, because that's what we were. Like we were at protest together. But I'll tell you that it is important that if we get from behind our desks and you actually get there on the feet of the people, that's how you know which leaders that you should be supporting, the people who are standing in the middle. And why is it so important? It's extremely important that artists and leaders, those who genuinely believe in social justice, that they are on the front lines of those issues. Why? Commissioner Davis's, her supporters might not be my supporters, and my supporters might not be her supporters. But if they see us out there fighting this fight together, it brings them along to let them know that the fight if they believe that the fight is much greater than me, then therefore it's something that I also need to get involved in. And so even the artists who are out there, many of them they are involved with it because they are now starting to recognize the oppressor, the ones who has tried to how should I say this? Brainwash them and their money for years. They figured it out. And so now they've realized that the only way that I'm going to get the people on my side is that I'm going to have to get in the middle with everyone else to let them know that I'm in this with you. I don't want nothing out of the deal. I just want to be a part of the movement that you're in.
Thank you so very much, Senator Jones. Is there any final wrap-up that you want to give us before you have to run and catch your plane? I know you're very busy, and we're grateful to have you here this evening.
I just want to come home, but I want to make it home today. But I'll say this, that, and I'll start off like I started. That make sure you look at your leaders who are having these type of conversations, who are calling things out to the carpet, and not just skating through the issues of this country, right? You know, I believe strongly that the time that we are in right now is calling for bold leadership. I promise you, if you can stand in the paint, people will paint with you. Trust me on that one. I'm telling you, because I've seen it. I see it with Commissioner Davis. I've seen it with Sister Yvette Colburn and so many others. And that's why I support people like them, because when we were out sweating at SEIU at the airport, we weren't doing it because we had elections. We were doing it because it was the right thing to do. And those people expected us as their leaders to show up for them.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so very much, State Senator. In the same way that reggae music brought diverse people together, not only on the island of Jamaica, but around the world, and was a movement, a liberation struggle genre of music. Litigation was also an important part of what made reggae music strong. Not just the legislation and how our music has been protected going forward in the years, as Junior will tell you, in the early years, not so much protected, right? But so it makes sense that the next speaker that we're going to hear from today is Alexandra Stephanie Adate, right? She is a partner with the firm of Adate and Flemings, and she is the head of the litigation section for that firm. She has tried over 75 trials to verdict. She's an amazing person in the South Florida community in terms of her interaction, not only across the political spectrum, but in terms of the Caribbean community. She presently serves in the role as treasurer for the Haitian Lawyers Association, and she's also active in the Caribbean Bar Association. It's an honor and a pleasure to have someone who is as esteemed as she is to be a panelist here this evening. And make no mistake about it, Alexandra Adate serves on the Black Lives Matter Alliance for Broward County. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together as we welcome her at this time. What is it that you have to tell us here this evening, Madame Esquire?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with everyone. I have been listening to the conversation and I've learned so much. And I want to start by saying that the movement for Black Lives has been inspired so much by the work of many people who are Black immigrants. And my work within this movement has always been to bring forth the voices of Black immigrants within the Black Lives Matter movement. The reality of it is just beyond just the ways in which reggae music and other Caribbean influences have been prominent and have influenced Black Lives Matter. The reality of police brutality affects Black immigrants and affects Caribbean immigrants very heavily. You know, even when we think about here in the South Florida community, there's a large Black immigrant community. And when the police, when we have police violence against a Black person, the determination of where this person comes from is not something that we even know about until way later. So when we're talking about racism, we are very much talking about the plight and experiences of Black immigrants. So a lot of my work focuses not just on the police, but also on immigration and customs enforcement and the ways in which ICE operates. And I even thinking about just recently, you know, we had 21 Savage who had an experience with immigration and customs enforcement. And I think it was the first time in a very long time that we saw people understand the reality of being immigrant, because even having wealth privilege did not, and fame did not prevent him from experiencing immigration detention and the ways in which the system can oppress Black immigrants. Here in the city of Miramar, you know, there is an ICE detention, there's an ICE check-in facility. And, you know, oftentimes when I go there, I see people who look like me, and I see Haitian people, I see Jamaican people, Bahamian people. I see a lot of people who look like me. And when we're talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, we often talk about a movement for liberation. Well, a movement for liberation cannot exclude Black immigrants, because when we have somebody, for example, who ends up in police custody, this person will then end up in ICE custody. So it's very important that if we are talking about all-encompassing movement for Black freedom, we recognize the importance of inclusion of Black immigrants within that movement. Because if we are able to close to close all jails today and get rid of policing, for example, we will still have to deal with the very issue of ICE, who very much operates like the police does, and who unfortunately is far less regulated. So those realities are the things that we have to take into account and address when talking about Black Lives Matter. Black immigrants' lives matter. And the contributions of immigrants to this movement and to this country matter, but also in appreciating and taking advantage of the things they have contributed, we have to also extend the protections that we seek to obtain for Black American people to Black immigrant people.
Thank you so very much. On the 76th anniversary of the birth of Bob Marley, where we hear songs like I shot the sheriff, but I didn't shoot the deputy. And then we have, how do you reconcile for us? And what role, if any, do you think this genre of music in terms of reggae has played in terms of the juxtaposition of having someone of Jamaican ancestry serving as the second most powerful person in the United States as vice president, 508 years after the first slave was brought to Jamaica by the Spaniards. While at the same time last year, we had Breonna Taylor, we had George Floyd. How do you reconcile that juxtaposition? What role, if any, do lawyers play, and does reggae music play in terms of bringing about a solution to what we're seeing as this dichotomy in the American society?
I think when we think, to me, when I think of reggae music and when folks think of reggae music, we think of freedom. You know, it is a song, it is music to the soul, it is music for freedom. So to me, a lawyer whose greater purpose is not to fight for justice and freedom is absolutely useless. So the place in which these movements meet is really in understanding that in the same ways in which music inspires us to move towards freedom and to move towards liberation, if we place ourselves within these systems, as a lawyer, you place yourself within the legal system, your common goal should be to push forward where the music leaves off, because the music stays in the car, the music stays outside of the door of the courthouse, but you enter the courtroom and you have a responsibility to further that thirst and that desire for freedom. So when you sing songs about freedom and you sing songs about liberation and you enter a courtroom and your behavior is contrary to that, you ought to turn off the radio, because to me it's beyond music, right? It's an inspiration, and it's about making sure that the work that you do then coincides and makes sense in the context of the music that you enjoy and listen to. I mean, to address the Kamala Harris portion of your question, and many other very important immigrants that have reached great achievements in politics and beyond in the United States, is that it's no secret that immigrants have enjoyed great success in the United States and have done contributions that are outstanding and extremely important to society. But I caution myself in seeing people like Kamala Harris as the standard or what it is that is achievable, because it can be done, and it has been done because she did it. But the reality of the immigrant who lives in Miramar is that in all of these years of immigration in this country, there has only been one Kamala Harris. So how do we make life livable, enjoyable, and great and I don't even want to use the word great anymore. Jeez, great for right for the immigrant who does not become Kamala Harris, because we are all deserving of freedom and liberation and of an enjoyable living, even if we don't become the Vice President of the United States.
When we see the origin of this word reggae coming out of the Akan language, you know, things like Tege Reg and Raga Raga and Virego, you know, looking at the most marginalized people in society. And when we see the transformative effect that this music has had in terms of ska, rocksteady, and reggae, in transforming how it is that people feel about themselves. How does this notion of feeling good about who you are, understanding and recognizing who you are, how does that translate into the Black Lives Matter movement and the empowerment of our people, not only here in the United States, not only on the island of Jamaica, but around the world?
I think very early on, and at times when we see people discussing the Black Lives Matter movement, sometimes we see people discuss them having pro LGBTQ agendas and other agendas. And I think the reason why is because just like the feel good feeling and the for the people aspect that you discuss is that at its core, I'll speak specifically from our perspective here in Broward County, we wanted a movement for all of us to show up in our entirety and feel good about who we are and feel seen and validated in who we are and feel appreciated for whatever our contribution is to the movement. And if you as an attorney show up and you want to contribute your legal skill, you are very much appreciated, just as much as a person who contributes art, just as much as the person who contributes their presence, just as much as the person who contributes whatever gift and talent or skill that they have to offer. And it is about that at the end of the day. It's about us being able to show up as we are, as our full selves, happy, fully fulfilled and appreciated within the movement and within the communities that we live in.
Wow, thank you so very much. And for a final question, just a quick question I wanted to ask you. So listen, one of the things that we see with reggae music is that reggae music coming out of people who were marginalized has become acceptable music genre for every race, every creed, every socioeconomic status. How does that relate to the fact that the Black Lives Matter movement, unexpectedly it seems, also appealed not just to the marginalized people in society, not just to Black and brown people, but we saw people from every race and socioeconomic background standing in solidarity with the movement during this past summer? What is it about this reggae music? What is it about this call to arms? Not arms in terms of military arms, but the call to arms for justice that the Black Lives Matter movement has inspired?
I think justice and truth has a way of speaking to the soul and unite people in ways that music does as well. And I think the reality of the Black Lives Matter movement is that its evolution, especially in recent months, has shown that people can tap into themselves and be honest and be truthful about the realities of Blackness in America and of racism in America. And when we speak from a place of consciousness and understanding, where we can look at the other person and be honest and say, I can see that the treatment that you are receiving is different than what I am receiving as a non-Black person, then we can reach a place where people can come together because we are in a place of honesty, we are in a place of truth, and in a place of nakedness, in the way that music does to us. Music moves us, it moves our core, and reggae music does that a lot. It speaks a lot to our conscious selves. So when we have a movement like the Black Lives Matter movement that goes to the core of the conscience. Like, do you see Black people as human? The humanity of Black people. And so it brings people together. It brings people together because it forces us to live in the truth.
Thank you so very much. Our last panelist for this evening, but that's decidedly not the least. You see, one of the things about the Black Lives Matter movement, and one of the things about reggae music, is that it not only appeals to the Rastafarian religion, but it goes all across different religious backgrounds and groupings. And so our next panelist here this evening is not only a lawyer, don't hold that against him, but he's a person who has so many degrees that if I were to list them, we wouldn't have enough time left on the program. He presently serves, his name is Dr. Jeffrey Dean Swain, and he presently serves as the Dean of Campus Ministry at Florida Memorial University. He's also an assistant professor of criminal justice, and his accolades are too numerous to get into at this time. But I think it's more important that we hear from him, because when you hear this powerful orator speak, then you'll understand why it is that Commissioner Alexandra Davis chose him as the third wrap-up finalist here for us this evening. Let's hear from you, Dr. Jeffrey Dean Swain.
Good evening, Judge Hemming, and thank you to Commissioner Davis for this opportunity to be included. I am the Dean of Campus Ministry here at Florida Memorial University, which is a 142-year-old historically Black college located here in South Florida. This has been a wonderful experience for me, certainly listening to all of the prior guests, and Mr. Junior Lincoln has been a wonderful education this evening in my life, and I thank him as well as all the other panelists for linking music, spirituality, rebellion, resistance, because all of these things have a hand in helping us to be who we are. I think one of the things that I want to point out first is that Black folk have to start thinking of themselves as a global people. We're all a part of a diaspora, whether we are in the Caribbean or in South America or here in America, or as we saw with the George Floyd movement, there was a large Caribbean population in London and across Europe that marched with us. And we can see that music, spirituality, resistance, and rebellion all go together. I was preaching this past Sunday on the theme, God Loves Black People Too, from the story of the Ethiopian eunuch of all things from Acts chapter 8, verses 26 through 29. And I talked about the fact that, our struggle for freedom has always been connected to music. We sang songs like Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen while picking cotton and complaining about being mistreated. We used songs like Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child to express our grief and hopelessness. And then we sang songs like Steal Away to Jesus, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, and Wade in the Water as a signal to other Black slaves that we were planning to run away. So there are lots of connections. And I mean, if you want to go back to the Caribbean, think of people like Granny Nanny in Jamaica, I believe. Think about the Maroons who ran away and into the mountains in various parts of the Caribbean and Latin America. And there has always been a time when Blacks have rebelled. We have never accepted the idea of being mistreated in a benign way. And so as I sat and I listened to all of the commenters tonight, and I want to thank Dr. Meeks, I believe it was as well. What a wonderful thing to know that our struggles are really the same, and again, we must think of ourselves as one people, though in different countries and though of different nationalities. We really are a one people fighting a common problem, which is injustice. Florida Memorial University, for example, just opened a social justice institute after all of the Black Lives Matter marching and statements and what have you that have gone on over the summer. And our desire is to be more prominently a part of trying to make sure that there's just simple justice for everybody. One of the things that I did in a class of mine, I used to teach the freshman orientation course here at Florida Memorial University. And I got a Haitian student, other students from the Caribbean, Afro-Latino student, African-American student, all to stand in front of the class together. And I said to them, when injustice comes your way, or violence comes your way, or the police come your way, none of them are going to know your ethnicity. The first thing they'll see in America is your color. That's what folk here are measured by. That's not what we ourselves would want, but that's what we are measured by. And at the same time, though, we all have to be equally strong in fighting and standing up for one another. There has never been a time when there was not a link between the struggle in America and the struggle of other Blacks across the Caribbean and across the world. If you think about the Harlem Renaissance, you think about people like Count Cullen and Marcus Garvey before that. And there's never been a time when Caribbeans and African Americans were not linked together in struggling. Whether you're talking about the Harlem Renaissance, the Civil Rights Movement, Harry Belafonte being from Jamaica during the Civil Rights Movement. If you talk about the Black Power movement, if you talk about somebody like Dr. James Cone, a theologian who drew on all of these precursors to himself. Cone died in 2018. He wrote an interesting book called The Cross and the Lynching Tree, where he said that the religious fervor of whites was impotent if they could love Jesus who died on a tree, but not think about the 4,000 Black people who had been lynched in America. So there's a great deal of connection between resistance, reggae resistance, music, rhythm, which I think of as rhythm, and religion. And one of my tasks here at the university is to constantly remind our students, and our students we have a student population that consists of students from Africa, a large segment, maybe 30% of our population here is from the Caribbean, as well as African American students. So we have to always think globally, and I have to always preach in a global way. But I'm deeply honored to be a part of this experience, and I'm, just deeply inspired by all of these connections that I hear and see. The attorney who was speaking before me, Attorney Odate,
yes,
was talking about the issue of humanity. One of the things that I constantly remember about the civil rights movement were these Black men who would hold up these signs that said, "I am a man." Our fight was just that basic, to have our humanity recognized. Everything about Blackness in America was connected to negativity and inferiority and being less than. And this was experienced whether you were in colonialism, whether you were in slavery, whether you were in the suppression that followed, all of these different branches of what is racial and prejudicial. And police violence is no different. One of the things, I'm a former attorney, and one of the things that I noticed very early going into the courtroom was that they would bring out 12 people at a time into the jury box who had been arrested during the weekend. And I began to notice very early on that there were more Black people in the box than other folk. And I'm in Miami where nearly, I think 65% of the population is Hispanic, and Blacks only made up 20% of the population. But I noticed that we always seem to be 8 of the 12 or 10 of the 12. And I began to pay attention to that. And so when these things about police brutality began to surface, here in Miami, back in 1980, you might remember we had a series of riots in 80 and 84 that started with the death of people like Neville Johnson, by the way, who was a Caribbean person. Yeah. And all of my life, I have seen injustice. All of my life, I've had to fight against it. Even when I went to law school at the University of Miami, there were people who felt we should not be there because we were people of color, or because I was Black in particular. And so the thing that I gather from this experience tonight is we're really one people fighting for a similar cause, no matter what continent or island we find ourselves on.
So Dean Spain, brilliant. But let me ask you this. The old Negro spirituals that you alluded to earlier, they were filled with double entendre and hidden meanings. And so it made sense that white people may be singing along with those songs, not understanding that the slaves are communicating with each other, that they're going to escape. But with reggae music, there's something different and distinct about it. There's nothing subtle or hidden in these songs, right? But he said, come with a chant on Babylon one more time. Listen, it's overt. So they're overtly saying that this is a music of resistance and change and revolution. How do you reconcile those two things? How is it that in the same way that the Negro spirituals have been so powerful in the civil rights movement, that today in the George Floyd and the Breonna Taylor movement, we see reggae music, although it's overt, being just as powerful and just as commanding and inspiring people?
Well, there are two things in that. One is that wherever Black people landed after slavery, we developed our own languages that blended with the languages of the slave masters. We called them patois, we called them creoles, we called them Black English, all kinds of things. But all of us have always had a separate language, say, within the language. And our music has always reflected that, whether we spoke subtly or whether we spoke openly. The point was we were always protesting and always letting it be known that we were not going to accept the present condition. Reggae, I was here when Bob Marley died in the early 80s. And this actually brought reggae more to my attention as a young man. I'll be 60 years old this year. And it actually brought reggae and Jamaica more to my attention. And I began to explore his life. He was a man who did not have to put himself on the line, but he did. And he did it out of a sense of love. That's no different than the civil rights leaders of this country. And that's no different than the people who fought for freedom in the independence of African countries. You know, the Nelson Mandelas, and back in the 50s, you know, when other African countries were fighting for their independence. All of us still have this common thing of we use our language and our music as a way of protest, and we use it as a way of letting folk know that we are not going to accept any present condition. My first book, as a matter of fact, was the first book that I ever wrote was a book called Black and Still Here. And I wrote that book because after looking at our history literally around the world, it's amazing that we survived in the first place, many of the atrocities that were done to us. But it's also amazing that we still have been creative. We still have generated music and poetry and drama, and we've been preaching the gospel. All of these things are evidence of the fact that we are alive and we are resistant to those things and those people who would not allow us to be ourselves. And so, you know, reggae for me in particular, and again, having been here at the time that Bob Marley died and beginning to gain a consciousness about what this meant to me as an African-American person, I am absolutely indebted to the Caribbean community, and particularly to the Jamaican community, for helping us to know how powerful what seems small in the eyes of others, a small country and a small number of people, can really affect the whole world.
Thank you, Dr. Swain. We'll look about Rutalo. I don't think we have time for the rapid fire section of questions. So I'm going to close with just this. It's amazing how reggae and resistance has transformed the entire world, but how it has impacted across the religious spectrum, whether it's Prince Buster as a Muslim, who was such an integral part of the reggae movement on the island of Jamaica, and having so many of his children residing in the city of Miramar today, or whether it's Minister Louis Farrakhan as a Muslim minister with his Jamaican roots, who makes no secret of the fact that part of his passion is inspired by reggae music and the music of resistance. Well, when we think of someone like Shirley Chisholm, who wasn't born in Jamaica, but was born in the Caribbean, who talked about the fact that her run for politics was in part inspired by reggae and what it is that this musical genre has done for her. We have come a long way. We still have a lot longer way to go, but the Black Lives Matter movement is inextricably intertwined with reggae music, because reggae music is at its essence music of resistance. Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Thank you, the City of Miramar. Let's kick it back to my co-moderator down there in Jamaica to wrap up for us, unless the Commissioner has something you'd like to say.
Commissioner, do you want to say something?
No, Dr. Cooper, that's fine. You can go ahead and close out.
Yes, I just want to say that was an interesting conversation, and we really need to look at the Black Lives Matter movement as a global movement too, because it's not just a US movement, because even here in Jamaica, we know that sometimes our citizens are victims of police violence. Brutality is not limited to a particular location. It seems that the whole mentality of policing is, we talk about the police force, and I think many times we associate policing with force, and we maybe need to start thinking about policing as a service. And in that way, we can begin to recognize that, yes, the police are an important part of maintaining social order, but so often that social order can be subverted. And we think too of the way in which the US police force started in the patrollers, those people who are patrolling runaway Africans, people are running away from slavery. So the history of policing is very much tied to oppressing Black people and restricting freedom. And it's the same thing with the police force in Jamaica. It's had its origins in maintaining the power of the plantocracy. So we really have to recognize that this struggle to celebrate our humanity, as Jeffrey said, is something that goes across national borders. So I'm very happy that we were able to share this platform together with this very important theme.
Well, I would love to say thank you very much to everyone for tuning in. My name is Ewan Simpson. I'm chairman of the Jamaica Reggae Industry Association, and I'm very proud to be associated with this discussion that has just ended, which was an amazing connection of reggae music, the resistance that reggae has become associated with, and the Black Lives Matter movement, which is very current and which is very real to our friends and family in the United States, and is in fact as global as reggae music is global. So we want to thank Commissioner Davis and her team from Miramar in Florida, and we want to thank Professor Cooper for leading this side of the conversation. It is important that we understand the global reach of what reggae is, not just as a musical form, but as a cultural form. It's important that we understand the history of it, as presented, for example, by our own Junior Lincoln. It's important that we understand the philosophy of it, as presented by Professor Meeks, as presented by all the erudite attorneys, former attorneys, and intellectuals from Miramar. And I'm happy that we could have tied this all together. And I hope that this has not just educated, but has inspired. At the end of the day, Bob Marley said, we feel it in the one drop, as we started, Professor Cooper started. But we still find time to rock, making the one stop, the generation gap. So we have to feel this drum beat that beats within, because it's playing a rhythm that's fighting against ism and schism. Thank you very much. We want to thank the Ministry of Culture. We want to thank the Ministry of Tourism. We want to thank the Chase Fund. And we want to thank all our media partners, all our sponsors who continue to bring Reggae Month, who continue to help us to celebrate who we are as a people. Have a good night.
Do you have the Reggae Jamaica mobile app on your phone? No? Well, you could be missing out on news, views, interviews, events, and so much more about the impact of reggae music across the globe. Information at your fingertips about Reggae Month and other exciting reggae events. That's the Reggae Jamaica mobile app, now available in the Apple or the Google Play Store. Get it now! Everybody wanna feel
is what you've been waiting for. A chance to change your point of view and take the break you deserve at Jamaica's resorts and attractions. When you can open your door to the seaside instead of just outside. Where you can change your mask and take a plunge.
Sunshine smiling warm up inside your heart. Feeling of pure love. Oh, Jamaican heartbeat. Dancing to the beat. Up inside your heart. Whoa. Heartbeat of the world. Oh, Jamaican heartbeat.
Contact your travel agent today to book your staycation. RediscoverJamaica.com.
Reggae Month is February. February is Reggae Month. Come catch the rhythm virtually. We gone online totally on Reggae Month TV. Mega reggae concerts, interesting reggae documentaries, informative reggae symposia, and lots more. Online daily from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. on PBCJ, Jam Vision, JCDC Facebook page, and several other cable and social media platforms. Details available on the Reggae Jamaica mobile app, Reggae Month TV. Tune in daily and be entertained and informed.
Presenting highlights of the Children of the Icons Concert Tour. Children of the Icons. Providing a platform showcasing young and emerging artists in the Jamaican music industry.
Emancipation Park. Make some noise right now for my good friend, Bongo Herman.
All who respect reggae music, get up out on the seat and stand up. Get up for 1 minute. If you don't respect reggae month and reggae, you want to put your hands together and say, yeah! Give me this, give me this. I hear